Good afternoon, everybody, and we apologize for the delay, but we would like to welcome you to the Wisconsin Policy Forum's Milwaukee Mayoral Forum. First of all, for those of you who are not familiar with our organization, my name is Rob Henkin. I'm the president of the Wisconsin Policy Forum, and we are a statewide, nonpartisan, independent policy research organization with offices in Milwaukee and Madison. We're supported by hundreds of corporations, nonprofits, local governments, school districts, and individuals who value data-driven public policy decision-making and civil and informed policy discussion. Milwaukee Mayoral Forum. First of all, for those membership information is available on our website, wispolicyforum.org. We are so appreciative that Mayor Barrett and Senator Taylor have taken the time to be with us today, particularly at this time of crisis. We also thank all of you in our audience for tuning in. The COVID-19 crisis and its health and economic impacts have turned our world upside down during the past several days, and we will spend a good portion of the next hour discussing the crisis and how city government is and should be responding. We will also work in some questions on critical policy issues that faced Milwaukee before the crisis broke, with a special emphasis on those we have analyzed in conducting our own impartial research. Before we hear from the candidates, I want to thank our sponsors. They are Clark Dietz, a multidisciplined consulting engineering firm. Clark Dietz employs 25 professionals in Wisconsin and more than 130 professionals regionally in offices and home offices in Wisconsin, Illinois, Indiana, and Kentucky. Over the last 60 years, Clark Dietz has remained focused on improving and contributing to our public works infrastructure, municipal services, water and wastewater treatment, and protecting our environment. And Reinhardt Berner Van Doren, SC. With 9 offices throughout the country, including one in downtown Milwaukee, Reinhardt's more than 200 attorneys deliver a combination of informed legal counsel, industry understanding, and superior service perfectly matched to each client's needs. Founded in 1894, Reinhardt is one of the nation's 250 largest law firms, serving as attorneys and business counselors to public and privately held corporations, financial institutions, family-owned businesses, retirement plans, exempt organizations, and individuals. Now let's review the format for today's forum. This is not a debate, but will be 2 separate interviews with the candidates. We determined by coin flip that Mayor Barrett would be interviewed first, followed by Senator Taylor. We will use the same questions for each candidate, although I will have the discretion to ask different follow-up questions depending on the candidate's responses. Each interview will last 30 minutes. So let's get started. Tom Barrett was elected as Milwaukee's 40th mayor in April 2004, and he was re-elected with over 70% of the vote in 2008, 2012, and 2016. He served in the Wisconsin State Assembly from 1984 until 1989, the Wisconsin State Senate from 1989 to 1993, and he served 5 terms in the U.S. Congress from 1993 to 2003. Mayor Barrett, thank you for joining us. First, thank you. I know you have been in self-isolation for the past several days. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling great, Rob. Thank you very, very much. Obviously, there's a lot going on right now, and I'm eager to dive into it.
Great. So let's start, of course, with the crisis. There are many dimensions to cover, but we'll begin with the public health ramifications. As alarming and tragic as the situation already has become in Milwaukee, we have not yet seen an overwhelming surge in citizens needing hospital care and intensive care along the lines of what we have seen in New York City and New Orleans, for example. My first question for you is, what is our current level of preparedness for such a surge, and how likely do you think is it to occur?
Well, let me talk just for a second about where we are right now, because as of this afternoon, we now have 627 reported cases here in Milwaukee County. Of those 627, 499, or just under 80%, are within the city of Milwaukee. As this began, they were disproportionately on the northern part of the city. They still remain disproportionately on the northern part of the city, but we are seeing more on the south side. We're seeing more throughout Milwaukee County. And we're seeing it spread to other counties as well. We've had 10 deaths. And in terms of the confirmed case count, we've had 271 African Americans testing positive and 153 Caucasians testing positive. So this has hit the African American community very, very hard. What I have done in terms of the surge in hospital beds is I've been working with the hospital systems, and we'll be meeting again tomorrow afternoon. The challenge, if you will, and it's very fortunate that we're well aware of where New York City was, or even where Italy was, because when they acted, it was after things started really swirling. Keep in mind here, we had our first case in the city on Friday, March 13th. It was Friday the 13th, so it will always be easy for me to remember. And we've gone from one case then over the last 17 days to 499. But I've been in contact with physicians, I've been in contact with the hospitals. We do currently, and I'm using that word purposefully, we currently have an adequate supply of beds, but I am very, very concerned. And so tomorrow afternoon, we'll be reconvening again. And when I say the challenge, I think in the past, several of these hospital chains, if you will, or organizations have been used to working very independently. And now it really is going to be a community effort that's going to be required so that we know exactly how many beds each has, where, if necessary, we're able to move to add more beds. One of the things that we've done just in the last 24 hours, in fact, in the last half hour before I signed on to this call, was I signed a memorandum of understanding between the city of Milwaukee and St. Francis de Sales Seminary. And that's not for healthcare, but it's important in this conversation, because what we have done is we've worked with Archdiocese, St. Francis de Sales Seminary. We've had great cooperation. This has been a total teamwork effort involving the city of Milwaukee, St. Francis, Milwaukee County, the National Guard, because we're concerned about the homeless and those individuals who have insecure housing, and what we're going to do for them so that they're not putting themselves in harm's way and they're not putting other individuals in harm's way. So the memorandum of understanding that I just signed again within the last half hour creates this understanding that Clare Hall, which is on a piece of property that straddles St. Francis and the city of Milwaukee, will be open. There's two separate wings, and one of the wings will be devoted to people who are symptomatic, and the other wing will be devoted to individuals who are at risk, older people who are at risk. And these are all individuals who have right now unstable housing situations. So the referrals will go from our health department, and our health department did a great job working with our Office of Community Development Block Grants, working with the Housing Division of Milwaukee County, working with St. Francis, and working with the National Guard to set this up. So that's part of what we're dealing with right now. But all of this is happening in real time. And I think what I think people should be pleased about is how closely we're working together. Every once in a while, of course, there's going to be bumps in the road. But I think what I have seen is a commitment and an understanding in state government, from the governor's office, working with our congressional delegation, working with the county, working with St. Francis, that we all understand what's at stake here, that this is really a pandemic that challenges us in a way that we've never been challenged before.
So just a couple quick follow-ups. First of all, you cited the disproportionate impact on the African-American community in Milwaukee. Why do you think that is? And can you tell us about specific actions that you and your administration are taking to try to address that?
Well, I think the challenge is understanding in real time what's caused it. I think that there are several theories here as to what it would be, but the epidemiologists are going to be the ones that are going to make that decision, I think, as they look at this. Obviously, what you have there is you've got more concentrated housing, so it's probably more difficult for people to isolate than they have in the past. In other parts of the state, it's certainly more difficult because of the density that you have there. I think that there are some underlying social determinants of health that may put individuals in these neighborhoods more at risk, more high blood pressure, more diabetes. I think that those are factors that certainly come into play. Initially, we saw a majority of our people tested positive as being men. That has now shifted, where a slight majority, just a slight majority of people who are testing positive are women. But I think that that's part of it. It may be also, and this, you're always looking for good things. There has been issues with testing, and the issues of testing have made it very, very clear that we don't have adequate testing. And this is something, again, today I will be working with the state some more to try to get more out of FEMA, to get more out of the stockpiles in terms of the personal protection equipment, in terms of the reagents, in terms of getting everything we can so that we can continue the testing. But the criteria for testing has been that you have to have, in essence, an elevated temperature, you have to have the coughing, you have to have the respiratory issues. And sadly, it might mean that more individuals on the north side have met those qualifications, if you will. And so I don't know what it is. We've been working with our health department, has worked very, very closely with some of our community partners so that we can get the message out about the social distancing, that's still, I think, the most effective tool that we have. But that's where places like Clare Hall come into play. You also have to have places where individuals can be in isolation. And what's fortunate about that location is you've got to the east Lake Michigan, and it really is a location where there's distance between that and the surrounding neighborhood. So it's trying to create that social isolation in instances where people would not normally have it.
So Mayor, we could obviously go on for the full half hour. I do want to move on to other issues, but just my final question, why are you the better candidate to deal with this crisis from a public health perspective going forward?
Well, if you look at what we have done here in the city of Milwaukee, I think it's clear that we have taken this very, very seriously. As I said, every time I spoke about this before it hit, which again was on March 13th, was that every indication was that it was going to come our way. And tragically, it has come our way. But what we did do, and you can look at New York City as an example, we were ahead of New York City essentially at every turn on this. And when I mean ahead of them, our actions were taken, we started taking actions before we had a serious issue with testing. I mean, with the number of people testing positive, because I could see this coming. And I worked with Congresswoman Moore. We worked on the first piece of legislation that came through Congress. I've been in contact with the governor's office consistently, with Senator Baldwin, with a lot of other officials to do what we can. So every step of the way, whether it was asking for the declaration of an emergency, whether it was closing down the bars and restaurants, whether it was the stay-home order, the city stay-home order that preceded the state stay-home order, every step of the way, we have been very, very proactive. And I don't think this is a time where you can come in and say, well, let's create some task forces. This is a worldwide pandemic that's occurring right now. And what you have seen is the city responding very, very quickly in many, many different areas, and the coordination is getting stronger. I don't think this is the time to throw out that coordination, that cooperation, that communication because of what's going on and the seriousness of it.
Thank you, Mayor. Let's shift gears a little bit. The very fact that we are having a mayoral election and spring elections 1 week from tomorrow, I'm interested in your take, and I think you've come out and said that you would have preferred for the elections to be postponed. Is that still your position, number one? Number two, given that now looks like it's unlikely to happen, tell us about the city's efforts to ensure that voters can safely cast their votes.
Well, earlier this month, I had conversations with the governor, with the majority leader, with the speaker, and in each of those conversations, I said I wanted to work with them because it was clear that they did not want to move the election. I pointed out some problems that we have locally and some changes that I wanted to see. But everything changed last Sunday. And what changed last Sunday was our election commissioner basically announced that his workers no longer wanted to come to work. And I do not criticize them. In fact, I think they were making a prudent health decision because I think it is very dangerous for people to be gathering around dozens, if not hundreds of people. This is a pandemic. And to say, well, somehow someone, because they're working in a polling place, is going to be immune from that, that's insanity. It's not going to happen. And so we were in a position where because we didn't have the workers, we closed down our early voting sites. Now, we have since reopened the site that will allow people to drive up, but I still have grave concerns about the safety of those workers and the people who come to that. What I did is I wrote a letter to the governor, to the majority leader and the speaker, and this is important. I didn't ask for a postponement of the election. I asked to modify the election schedule. And the reason I did that is because, in essence, the election has already begun. There are many people who have requested their absentee ballots. There are many people who have returned their absentee ballots, but it still, in my mind, is very dangerous to have people coming to vote next Tuesday. So this is what I suggested, and I still believe that this is feasible, that we make this a vote by mail ballot, that we do that just as other states have done it. What's interesting, and I've done the research in the last 24 hours, I cannot find another state that is holding an election during the month of April. We are a complete outlier in terms of what I've been able to find in elections. There's one that's tentatively set in Puerto Rico for April 26th, I think, but even there, the legislature has said that if the emergency continues, they'll move it. Just this past weekend, Governor Cuomo has moved his till June, actually after the delegates for the Democratic Convention have to be picked. But because ours has begun, I think it's not uncommon, and you've seen this from time to time, where there'll be a court order or administrative decision to keep the polls open longer. If you might have a malfunction in voting equipment, or you have a surge of people voting at a site, what you do is you keep the polls open. I think the most practical way that honors our democracy, but is consistent with public health goals, is to say, okay, the election has begun, but there's no magic in having it end on April 7th. In other words, you could go 2, 3, 4 weeks and allow people to return their ballots. And that would give us time, because we looked into this. We looked into sending out ballots or ballot requests to everyone. And frankly, we couldn't find someone who could do that fast enough for us to do it. This would give us time to send everybody ballots and give people the time to get the ballot, to vote, and to return the ballot. That would allow more people to be involved in the election. And I think that that's the most prudent way to do it. There is a case pending in the Western District, and I'm hopeful that the judge will see that. One other point on this, to underscore the public health ramifications of this. Under current law, the date for applying for an absentee ballot, as I understand it, it ends on April 2nd. So what does that mean? If someone tests positive for COVID-19 on April 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, or 7th, do we tell them you can't vote? Do we tell them show up? We certainly don't want people who are testing positive during that 5-day period to show up at the polls. That would be a public health disaster. And so 5 days before the election, including the election day, we've got to do something, because you can see these numbers climbing. There has to be something that's done to address that issue. And I think the most prudent way to do this, again, because I'm concerned about the safety of our election workers, and our election commissioner has projected that normally we have maybe 1,500 to 1,800 workers. We're essentially at 400 right now. So he's talked about, and I understand why he's doing this, maybe having maybe 5 places throughout the city where people would come. Well, that makes sense if we're trying to use this as an election device. But from a public health standpoint, to say, okay, we're going to have hundreds of people going to these sites, again, I think it just wreaks havoc on it. So I think our election commissioner has done a great job in an incredibly stressful situation. But we're going to need either the state, which I don't have confidence in the state acting on this, or the federal court to help us get the guidance to have this, the twin goals of having a legitimate election, and also recognizing we're in a worldwide pandemic.
Okay, let's move to the impacts on the city's economy. Prior to the crisis, we were in the midst of a downtown development boom that now likely will be delayed at best, but that also may sharply dissipate. The city's unemployment levels, at least for the short term, are going to be staggering. The city's already high levels of poverty are likely to grow. Please give us your assessment of the economic impacts and what city government and you, if you're reelected for another 4 years, will do to address them.
Well, you're absolutely correct in your questioning that we are actually dealing with 2 crises right now. We have the public health crisis, which consumes everything, and we need to take it as seriously as we can. But right alongside it, you can see this economic disaster that's heading our way in terms of unemployment. All you have to do is look at the spike in unemployment claims, the disproportionate impact it's going to have on lower income people who are hourly workers or people who have part-time jobs. This is going to have a devastating impact. The president signed the legislation over the weekend that allowed relief to individuals and businesses. Yesterday, again on Sunday, I brought my team together to say, all right, we have to now craft something that does not duplicate what is happening at the county level, does not duplicate what's happening at the state level or the federal level, to help businesses and individuals, to help individuals with foreclosures. For example, I had a meeting with the members of the clergy last week, and I called the meeting because I wanted to ask them for their help in reaching individuals in the African American community, for example, that city government can't reach. And we had a good conversation, but as we talked further, it became evident, and I remember one person on the call saying that their church donations were down 70%. And so the churches themselves, not to mention the businesses, but the churches who have mortgages, who have payrolls, what are they going to do? And so obviously I support the moratorium on evictions. I support the moratorium on foreclosures. But we're going to be working very, very proactively with small business. I had a meeting last week with our business improvement districts and our neighborhood improvement districts to get the ball rolling as to what their needs are. Our Department of City Development is working on that and reaching out to the financial institutions so that we can make sure that the banks aren't calling loans. That's very, very important. So all of this is a way of saying we are working around the clock, literally around the clock, to try to deal with both the public health issues that we're facing, with the economic issues that we're facing. You throw in the challenges with the election. This is all consuming right now.
So clearly those are the all-consuming issues, but another huge factor, of course, will be the impact of all of this on city government's own finances. And very clearly, even before the crisis broke, arguably the city had reached a point of crisis in terms of its financial challenges, particularly because of the escalating pension fund payments that were estimated by your actuaries. So if you are the winner on April 7th, obviously one of your primary tasks after dealing with all of the impacts of the crisis will be to begin wrestling with the 2021 city budget. What will your priorities be, and how will you try to shield city residents from very sharp service level impacts?
Well, I want to compliment you and your organization for the work that you have done at looking at the city finances, at looking at the challenges we face. One of the things that I've said for a long time is I have tremendous confidence in the people in the city of Milwaukee. I've seen their resilience. I've seen how they've bounced back from the greatest economic downturn that we have seen since the Great Depression. Now, of course, we're facing an unprecedented challenge. I'd say the biggest world challenge that we have had since World War II, the biggest health challenge that we faced since the 1918 pandemic. And we're going to get through this. We're going to get through this. It's going to be painful, but I do want to focus on the future. Obviously, I want to focus on the future. And again, I have tremendous confidence in the future of this city. But our big challenge, and it has been for several years, as you know, is our relationship with the state. We have to reset our relationship with the state. And I've been very, very clear that I am supportive of having a 1 cent sales tax increase, using some of that money for property tax relief, using some of that money for public health issues, specifically dealing with lead paint issues, as well as lead lateral issues, so that we've got a constant source of funding for that, which is something that is a priority for me, but also making sure that we don't have to have draconian cuts in our departments. And right now, the budget for the Milwaukee Police Department is larger than the entire property tax levy for the city. And that is not economically feasible in good times. And in difficult times, it's going to get even harder. So I've been very, very clear on that. Fortunately, I've had a lot of support from many of our local state legislators who understand that we are trying very, very hard to build that relationship with the state and get this done. And we could use some more support. We could use support from across the aisle, and for those legislators who have not signed on to this. But that to me is clearly one of the things that we have to deal with.
And why do you think that you are the best candidate to deal with state government on this?
Well, obviously, what we have right now is a situation where we are starting to get their attention. Again, you know this because you were at the hearing. It has taken us a while, and it's been frustrating, but I don't give up. I never give up. And a big part of it is the education component of it. And I was able to meet with a number of Republican legislators. And after that meeting, they left that meeting, I think, with a better understanding And for the first time on this issue, we have now had a public hearing. And so I'm actually more optimistic on that issue than I have been in some time, because I think that they, certainly the leadership in the legislature, understands the pension challenges that we face, understands the public safety challenges that we face. And I think it has been an educational process, but I'm continuing to spend time doing that. And that's what it takes.
Mayor, I want to shift to education. And obviously that's an issue that is not under the purview of the mayor, but also obviously it's one that is central to Milwaukee's economy and its quality of life. The educational upheaval that we're seeing as a result of this crisis clearly is something that's going to have to be dealt with. I'm wondering if you could please share with us your view on the appropriate role for the mayor in terms of monitoring and advocating for K-12 educational improvements in the city of Milwaukee. And also, what is your position on the MPS referendum, which will also be on the ballot next week?
Well, let me start even earlier than that, because I've laid out 4 pillars of what I want to work on in the next 4 years. And leading off on that is early education, because I think no matter what happens as we get through this horrific period, we have to recognize that early education, educating kids and getting them familiar with words, getting them more acclimated, having good pay for people who work in preschool programs, all of that is important. And I think that the city can, and I intend, and I've already begun to take a role in that, in working with the foundation community, with businesses, working with state government, so that we can, in many ways, be the facilitator to bring everyone together to put a focus on early education. The other pillars, just so we don't miss those, are housing. I've set a goal for 10,000 new housing or refurbished housing units, and we're working towards that goal. Obviously, public safety, and obviously the public health concerns that are paramount right now. But in terms of education, I meet regularly with the superintendent, because I want to be supportive as I can be, on the issues that we are facing right now, because the future of the Milwaukee Public Schools is directly intertwined with the future of the city of Milwaukee, because it's our future workforce. And so I have had a history of working closely with the superintendents, because I think that's important. In terms of the referendum, I'm going to let the people decide that. I'm focusing on everything I can do to deal with the finances of the city. And I think people will be able to understand that issue on their own.
Great. Mayor, we're running out of time. I wanted to give you an opportunity. Again, this is an historic time in the history of our city, of our country, of our world. It's hard to focus on a mayoral election next week, but this is a critical election. So what is your case to the voters as to why you are the candidate that deserves another 4 years in office?
Without a doubt, Rob, this is probably the most unstable period that we have faced as a world, as a nation, as a community. And the instability that we're facing calls to have leadership that is stable, calls to have leadership that works with people, that understands the pressures we're under, that understands that the work that is being done and has been done has to continue. It's not the time for a tumultuous upheaval in city government, particularly at a time when we are going to see brand new leadership at the county, both in the county executive and on the county board, where we're going to see a new comptroller, where there's a lively race for city attorney. There needs to be stability. And for whatever people want to think about me or this issue or that issue, I think most people understand that I have an understanding and a love for this community, that I have an understanding and an appreciation for having a stable approach. And that's what I'm going to continue to do. I want to be the steady hand that navigates through this. This is not the time to come in and have task forces to try to reinvent this stuff. The decisions we're making literally on an hourly basis to try to move our community forward.
And Mayor, just one last follow-up on that. You know, the racial disparities that have been so glaring in the city of Milwaukee for so many years potentially have never been as pronounced as they are today, when we just see the impacts on, for example, the African-American population and the disproportionate impact so far in terms of those public health impacts. Going forward, how will you seek to address that set of issues?
Well, I work on those issues on a daily, if not hourly basis, because it's something that's very real to me. And if you look at my administration, there is by far the most diverse administration that we've ever seen in this city, because I understand I need to have people who can understand all parts of our city. One of the things that I have said over and over again is that my goal is to bring this community together. I do not want to have a divided Milwaukee. And just earlier this week, I put out a statement in contrast to what the president was saying and trying to blame Asians for this pandemic. That to me is the exact opposite way that we should be going. We should be dealing with the science. We should be trying to bring people together, because Milwaukee is stronger and Milwaukee is safer when we act as one.
Thank you. Mayor Tom Barrett, again, we so appreciate your being with us this afternoon. Please stay safe, stay healthy, and again, our sincere thanks.
Thank you.
So for those of you who are tuning in, and for those who joined us late, again, what you have joined is the Wisconsin Policy Forum's Mayoral Candidate Forum. We just heard from Mayor Tom Barrett, and in just a moment, we are now going to hear from his challenger, Senator Lena Taylor. I again want to thank our sponsors, Clark Dietz and Reinhard Berner, and I also want to thank all of you for tuning in. So let's move forward. Lena Taylor is serving her 4th term as a Wisconsin state senator, elected to the Wisconsin Assembly in 2003 and to the Wisconsin State Senate in 2004. She served as the first African-American chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee and the first African-American woman to co-chair the powerful Joint Committee on Finance. Senator Taylor, thank you for joining us. And my very first question for you, how are you feeling? How are you holding up through all this?
I'm doing well. I've been doing a lot of work around the issues of helping constituents who have had issues as essential workers, helping and connecting with the governor and the governor's office. Just spoke with them yesterday to help to secure 1 million masks, N95s for our state, and to help to get some of the face shields that the people on the front lines will need, as well as putting input in to the governor's office about the need for the county to play a larger role in how we are moving forward with the pandemic, and also doing work with the city and those individuals who are there trying to do work in that way. So in responding and trying to look out for my mother and my brother and my son and my father, because my mom just got a diagnosis a few months ago for stage 4 cancer, and got great news last month that they could not find cancer when they did the MRI. So trying to get her to stay in and do little, and my son has asthma, so it's been a lot, but we've been working around the clock every day, and was really excited to help to secure the mask.
Okay, well, thank you. So I want to start again, obviously, with the impacts and ramifications of the crisis. We'll start with the public health aspects. I want to ask you a question that I asked to the mayor. We are fortunate so far, though clearly things are becoming very alarming and tragic, that we have not seen the overwhelming surge of citizens needing hospital care and intensive care along the lines of what we have seen in cities like New York City and New Orleans. I'm wondering what your assessment is of Milwaukee's level of preparedness for such a surge, and how concerned are you that we will indeed see one in the days and weeks ahead?
I am concerned about how Milwaukee has been proceeding. I've articulated that to the governor and asked, that's why I asked for the county to be more involved. The worst is yet to come. And the lack of, well, I shouldn't say the lack, but clearly the disparities that exist in healthcare in Milwaukee in particular have been a huge problem for some time. And so as a result of that, we are only going to see that kind of effect. I want to say yesterday, the mayor made a comment of saying that, you know, he was seeing the disparities of the healthcare that everyone gets. Everyone doesn't get the same healthcare. And that is a reflection of the lack that has existed in this particular administration. We've had people die who have gone to emergency rooms, including someone who was turned away and for not being able to breathe. We don't know whether or not that person had CV-19 back then. But my point is that our healthcare system is very challenged. And where I'm also challenged is that we've not had a sense of urgency on how we responded to this. When we knew that there was a case in the state, we should have been moving. We should have had a group of individuals together and to move us forward. In addition to that, there has not been adequate tracing or follow-up by the health department. My office in particular has had to help individuals who have had symptoms and very candidly were sent back home. And so that is helping the communal spread. So I've asked the governor to help us with tracing. I've asked the governor not only to help us with tracing, but to build up also places that individuals would be able to be, I don't want to call it quarantined, but grouped. And I know that the mayor mentioned in particular the St. Francis site. I don't remember the exact name of the site, but I know that the St. Francis mayor is very upset with him. And this is the kind of thing that he always does. He jumped in front of what that mayor and the representatives from that community were trying to do. So I am concerned about where we are in this pandemic. I'm concerned about the lack of tracing. I'm concerned about the lack of healthcare options, especially for people of color, and that have always existed in this community. And I'm extremely, extremely, extremely concerned about us not having a mechanism to quarantine people so that we can reduce the communal spread.
Let me ask you, so clearly, I mean, one of the most alarming aspects of all of this is the disproportionate impact so far from what we know, based on the data that's out there, in terms of the impact on the African-American community in Milwaukee. We know that all of the fatalities have been African-Americans. Your thoughts on A, why that is, and B, are there more concerted specific strategies that need to be put in place to address it?
So the first thing I'll say is when we are nearly a month into this, and we're just getting to the place that we're finding somewhere for our homeless population to be, that is a part of why communal spread is the way it is. When we are at a place where we have not figured out how to engage all hands on deck, people across the community, all across the board, because we have not done that. That is also a problem. I will say to you that I believe that this is partly this way because we live in a city that is hyper segregated, and we have accepted the disparities that exist in this city. This administration, has very candidly not done what they could to wrap around families early on, having a hub model so that we would have been able to, in the communities, 14 communities that the chief says, 10 communities that Red Cross said, that are very challenged communities. If we had hub models set up in every one of those places, we would be able to disseminate information, help people, assess people, distribute things to individuals more effectively. That has not been the priority of this administration. And so as a result of that, all of those things will, continue to make this very difficult on your most needy populations. And then I'll end with this. You mentioned, the populations that are being mostly affected in this city. This is something that's a global pandemic. This is the only place that individuals have articulated it by race. And that is what the mayor and the health department, have done. I want to be clear, this is touching everyone. It doesn't matter your race, it doesn't matter your sex, it doesn't matter your income level. And as a result of that, the communal reach should have been something that we did right away, day one. And that is one of the major failures of this administration. But at this point, it's not just about articulating what the administration is doing wrong. It is about how can we change that? And that's where I've asked the state to come in and take more ownership on what needs to happen, because this is going to be a huge wave, a huge surge. And it is why I also asked the state for the county to take a larger role.
Senator, just my last follow-up in this area before we move on, but I'll ask you the same question I asked the mayor. You've sort of articulated this, but I'm wondering if you could just restate why you think. The mayor made the point that now in this time of crisis is not an ideal time to see a change in leadership in City Hall. Why do you think going forward that you are the better candidate to address the public health impacts of this crisis?
Well, first of all, I want to be clear. If anyone went back and looked at the timeline of press releases that I've done, although the media has not did my press releases, I have led in every item. I led in asking for there to be a stay-at-home order. Shucks, the mayor asked for a state of emergency before the mayor even did a state of emergency for the city. And the only thing that the mayor did was close down the polls as the first thing that he did, instead of making sure that people were safe and thinking about exactly what could we be doing in order to get ahead of this surge. So why am I better? One, I've already been leading. Two, I'm concerned about the people, and I put the people first. I always have in all of the leadership that I have done. I will tell you that if you look at the mayor's history, whether that history is with the lead laterals and the lead issue with our children, he is always late to the party. He never has a sense of urgency for the people. And so I have a heart for the people that is reflected in who I am. And I'm already working with the state and working with the county and the city. And so one person, for lack of a better way to say it, does not disrupt things. And because of the failed approach that the mayor has done to this and allowing the surge to get so bad, allowing our issue to get so bad before the surge, this is why we need the state and we need the National Guard and whomever else to come and help us to move forward. And so I will be able to work with those individuals in the same way. Literally, I'm doing it every day now.
So let's turn to the fact that we are having an election 1 week from tomorrow, and wanted to get your take on whether we should be, what should be happening on April 7th, and what the city can and should be doing to ensure that voters can safely cast their votes.
Well, the first thing I want to say is I know that, you know, it's very difficult probably for people to think about the importance of an election, but I want them to know that, you know, we're even working on a special session right now that we may have in regards to the state, so that we can figure out what things will we be able to do for businesses and for individuals. So your government still needs to work, right? Your government is the way that you're going to get those unemployment compensation checks or help for your business. All of those things are important. I mean, think about it. We're a month in and the mayor is just now thinking about what to do for small businesses. So that's very challenging. It's a shame that he has chosen to not debate me, and that he has run away from debating me, and that he's using, and I think it's ethically a challenge, using the virus as a way to stay in office. That's not appropriate, as well as using it as a way to get free millions of dollars of airtime. That's not appropriate. It's the health commissioner that should be the person that is in front. The mayor is breaking the law every way that you turn. He went into a polling location. That is illegal. He did it not just during the early voting, but he did it also during the primary. You can't do that. And the lie that they're telling that there are not poll workers, that's not true. I have emails where poll workers have asked to be able to work when they went and closed Midtown. The mayor says he's concerned about people of color, but he closed the site that was the largest turnout for early voting. And he had to be told by the state election commission that he did not have power to do that. This is why I'm filing a lawsuit to say that he is, I believe, in violation of the Voters Rights Act. And this kind of disenfranchisement is unacceptable.
So you are in the process of filing a lawsuit here to,
yes,
is that to try to also
today.
put a hold on the election?
The lawsuit is frankly to deal with the mayor and to deal with the election itself. I believe that the mayor and the election commissioner have been very deceitful in what they've put out for information. The media here in Milwaukee has refused to share that information with the public. And so I appreciate, Rob, the forum that you have done by at least allowing this opportunity to get out in a larger way. But if it was me that went in the polling location, it would be all over the news. It would be all over the news. MPD would have responded to a complainant and the election commissioner would have responded. Neither have done that. Both of those are under the mayor's administration. And that tells you the corruption and cronyism that this mayor has in his administration. And so that has to change, or the disparate effects that exist on people of color in this community will never change. He has an administration that in some departments, it's 70% people of color in this city. He has some departments with no people of color. That is unacceptable. He talks to you about economic development, and I look forward to having that conversation with you. I hope if we have enough time.
Yep. So, that was actually my next question, but just before we get there, are there specific, so obviously the mayor does not have any control over what the legislature does or doesn't do and what the courts do or don't do in terms of postponing or delaying the election. Assuming that indeed it has to take place and the votes need to be counted on April 7th, are there specific things that you would be doing differently to ensure that voters are not disenfranchised?
So first things first, I would have never closed the polling location for the early voting so that people would have lost a week. The suburbs around us and other counties are still voting, and we were denied the opportunity for our voting to continue going through. I would have never done that. Second, if I needed additional poll workers, I would have asked the National Guard to come in. He could have done that long ago. You could have done a clarion call to the churches and people in the community to ask nonprofits, city workers, county workers to be able to come and do work. The election commissioner could have done that. And so where I am at is, if you know, as a mayor, that the state is not going to change the law. And so everyone knows the Republicans would have to bring us in, and we would have to agree, both houses, on a new date or whatever should happen. We have not had session at this point. And so because we have not had session at this point, that's not going to happen. So it's a mayor's responsibility to make sure that your people have a voice. He has denied us in the Supreme Court race to be able to have a voice. He has denied people of color in particular the most with the confusing things that they've done. I just heard an ad today that they ran saying stay home, but they're not running ads to explain to people what to do in regards to being able to early vote. And then I'll end with just a few things here. One, the early voting that they are now doing, that they're only doing at Zeidler, the problem with that is it's downtown and everyone doesn't have the ability to go there. That's number one. Number two, they're doing witnesses. If someone can witness your ballot, then tell me why you can't ask for a ballot somewhere else and do that at the other drop-off places that they have. If they can do that at the other drop-off places, we should be able to make it where people can also ask for their ballot. People who are not registered are not going to be able to vote after today, and that is not acceptable. Everyone deserves the right to vote if they are an eligible voter. And as a mayor, he should be standing up, trying to make sure that our people are franchised, not that they are disenfranchised. And so I will be fighting for us as a legislature to do something, but I don't anticipate that that's going to happen. As a mayor, I would be putting things in place to assure that my people have a voice. That's the difference between the mayor and I. He is not passionate about the people. I am.
So let's move on to the economy and the devastating economic impacts that this crisis is happening again across the globe, but clearly in the city of Milwaukee. Please give us your assessment of those impacts and what you as mayor would do to address them.
Well, before we talk about the economy and the way it is after the virus, can we talk about the way it was before that happened?
Sure.
Rock bottom for small businesses among Black and Brown people. You can't change the poverty level that exists in this community if you don't inspire entrepreneurism. That has not been a priority of this administration to change those numbers. The other piece is Employ Milwaukee. The mayor has managed Employ Milwaukee horribly. It is the county workforce investment board. We've had what, 5 people in the last 4 years. A ship cannot be strong in employment if you don't have someone steering that realm, steering that ship and at the helm the entire time. So that's very concerning for me. The amount of unemployment among people of color has been horrible in this city. And so this isn't just about jobs for this city. This is about entrepreneurship and business development in the city. And the mayor is, to his own admission, is just now thinking about what to do for businesses in the city. That is something I've been talking to the governor about from day one. What we should be doing in regards to for businesses and moving us forward in regards to the CV-19 and the effect that it's going to have on the economy. I mean, very candidly, many businesses are falling to the wayside. I mean, that's basically what's happening. But there's been a lot of creativity also that's been done. And so if we can be creative for people to go and get their craft beer, then I think that we should also be creative on figuring out how we can help businesses and individuals, you know, for so many other things. It's so much bigger than downtown. The mayor was only, it seems like, committed to the development of downtown. We have to look at our neighborhoods and we have to empower them. We should be using our bids and we should be using our neighborhood associations and partnerships so that what we can do is build up, you know, the main streets in each of the neighborhoods. And that's not something that I feel that this administration gets. They're much more committed to downtown than they are to the people. And so during this time, I think it also is in some ways not a clean slate, but it's an opportunity for, as we rebuild, to rebuild with equity. You know, the county executive said anyone who is running who does not talk about the inequities in this city or this county and address those issues, that person is missing the boat. And that's exactly why I'm saying leave Tom Barrett on the sidelines and vote Lena Taylor, because he does not think about equity. He is not concerned about that. And he's not concerned about the equity that needs to happen in our neighborhoods and among, you know, among businesses growing in our communities.
So let's shift now to the city itself and city government and the very severe fiscal challenges that Milwaukee faced even pre-coronavirus crisis. If you are elected mayor in April, one of your first tasks will be to begin thinking about the next city budget at a time when the city was already facing these challenges, at a time when the escalating pension fund contributions may have to escalate even more given the status of the pension fund assets. So what types of priorities will you set, and how will you go about sparing citizens to the greatest extent possible from service level impacts?
So the first thing that needs to happen after 10 years of not even auditing your budget, your departments, that's something that has to happen. The mayor has not audited his departments for 10 years. You can't have the respect of people in Madison with being efficient, frugal, doing well with your dollars if, one, you're not auditing your departments. Also, let me talk about the HOP and the role that that has with how people think in Madison. The mayor took dollars that were supposed to be for a blighted area, and he took those dollars and he used them in the downtown area. Those federal dollars were supposed to be used to move people to work, low-income people to work. And as a result of that, Congressman Obie changing that, the county got some dollars, the city got dollars. The county used theirs on buses. The city used theirs on the HOP. And he also used TIF for the HOP, which will ultimately cost us $100 million. So part of what I'm articulating is that investment is another example of the disparities that exist in this city and how the mayor has moved forward with his economics. So how can you go and spend that kind of money and then go and ask Madison to help you with your pension or help you with this in your budget or that? And so I believe a change is necessary also in order for there to be a new slate, for individuals to be able to believe and know that Milwaukee is not being irresponsible with the dollars that come to them. Think about this. That money was supposed to be used for the HOP to move people to work. And now it's free rides for individuals who can afford very expensive condos versus people who pay for buses had their routes pulled back. And then I'll end with this. When he did the HOP, he didn't even put in fare boxes. So he clearly never intended to have them pay. That's irresponsible. And I actually believe a misuse of federal dollars.
So the mayor, and you've touched upon the need for help from Madison. Where do you stand on the 1% county sales tax proposal that would distribute a big chunk of those proceeds to municipalities, and the city would get a big share? Are you supportive of that? Number one. Number two, why are you the better candidate to fight for Milwaukee's fair share in Madison?
So a couple things. The first I'll say is I'm known for being someone who's worked across the aisle. I've done more than about 120 pieces of legislation. Even when we left the state to deny quorum, I had a piece of legislation that got passed during that time. That is a reflection of how I am able to work across the aisle and the respect that I believe that I have of my colleagues. Doing the bill for the juvenile justice facility, I was key for that bill getting done. And so I think the respect among the leaders, that there is no question that that's there. And I think that that matters. I think that what I can say to you in regards to, how are we going to get the funds that we need? I believe that a new team creates a new opportunity. And a team of individuals like myself and Representative Jason Fields as a comptroller and will create a different team that people can respect in Madison. We've done a lot of work across the aisle in that regards. Now, when you ask where I am, whether it is on the 1% sales tax, or for that matter, whether it's on the referendum for MPS, I'm going to leave those things up to the people. But what I will say to you is that I'm not confident in how the mayor would use those dollars. And so that is a concern of mine. And very candidly, I've been an advocate for the sales tax back when we first did a non-binding referendum. And what was it, like 70, almost 80% of people who said they wanted to do that. I was on the finance committee. I fought for that. There's been many times that we tried to do that. So those are issues and concerns that we've talked about on many times and many occasions.
So you just touched briefly on the MPS referendum. I want to ask you a broader question about education. Okay. Obviously, that's not under the direct purview of the mayor. That said, K-12 education in Milwaukee is a critical issue for our economy, our quality of life, addressing racial disparities, et cetera. What do you see briefly as the role of the mayor in terms of working to improve K-12 education in the city?
First of all, nobody moves to a city if they're a young couple, is someone who wants to have a family, if they do not have a strong school system. That's how a lot of people decide where they're going to buy their homes. So I think it's hugely important for a mayor to wrap around their school system and to bring all of the resources, all of the supports that a city can to a school district. I believe that Mayor Barrett has failed in that way. He's often afraid to speak to the issues of crisis, whether it is the race issues that exist in the city with the segregation and with the inequities that exist here, both in his own administration as well as in so many other components of what happens in the city, whether it's healthcare or services or you name it. But I'll also say to you that education in this city, there are multiple different options. And the truth of the matter is we've needed one ecosystem where we work together for a long time. And so we need a mayor that is not afraid to say, I need everybody at the table. One of the things that I believe doesn't exist here is that we have a mayor that instead has put his head in the sand or tried to hide in no way different than he's done with debating me. I mean, this forum is the way that it is versus the way that you guys normally do a forum, because the mayor refused to participate in a debate. I mean, you can't have a mayor that is afraid to be able to speak to the issues. And so education, I sit in the seat that I'm in because of going to MPS, going to UWM, and I've been an advocate for them. I've brought more dollars to Milwaukee public schools than I think any Milwaukee legislator, with new things that I've put in place, whether it was poverty aid, whether it was additional count days. And so all of those things are things that I feel are really important. I believe equity, wealth, and education, that those are the key issues that we have to deal with as a city. And we need a mayor that is willing to bring people to the table and to make that a priority and to move us forward. And that's exactly what I'll do, because I'm only the senator. I'm only the girl from 15th and Capitol by way of 29th and North Avenue, who happens to be only the second African-American to be a state woman to be a state senator, and the first woman to be in a general for mayor in the city of Milwaukee, and will be the first African-American to be elected, but the second African-American mayor behind Marvin Pratt, who, by the way, Tom Barrett told he was not going to run for mayor and then did, and played very dirty politics with him at the end. I'm telling you that me being in office is going to be extremely important, both not only for our education system, because I'm going to go and wrap around them, bring the health department and various services, but it is because I am the example of what will happen for our residents, for our young people, if we put supports around them.
So, Senator Taylor, thank you. We've actually run out of time. My last question to you is going to be, why do you think you're the correct candidate? But I think you just answered that question. So again, I want to thank you for taking the time to participate. I urge you stay safe and healthy, and keep on spraying that Lysol that I saw on the table behind you.
So Rob, I want to thank you so much for giving us this opportunity. I also want to thank you for the work that you all do. Just think, if we had the fee that I wanted to do on Uber Eats, we might have some other revenue coming in too. So maybe we'll talk about that a little more later. I hope people will go to GoLenaTaylor.com. I hope that you will vote. And more than anything, stay safe, stay home.
Okay, thank you, Senator. So I want to thank all of you for joining us this afternoon. Thanks again to our candidates. Thanks to our sponsors, Reinhardt and Clark Dietz. As the fight against COVID-19 changes our daily lives, the Wisconsin Policy Forum maintains its commitment to providing the highest level of nonpartisan public policy research on state and local issues in Wisconsin. Stay tuned for the release of upcoming forum reports on the impacts of the crisis, including analysis of impacts on key sectors of Wisconsin economy and implications for municipal and county governments. Finally, I wanted to remind our viewers it's possible to follow the forum on Facebook and Twitter. If you are not already doing so, please sign up so you can be apprised of our policy research and insights. With that, we are adjourned. Thank you for tuning in. Please keep up your social distancing and stay healthy and safe.